Hello everybody, welcome to the Neil's Homestead. I'm Jeanette and I'm out in our greenhouse number 4 where we're growing a big long row of cucumbers grown up on trellises, a string trellis. And I've picked about 25 pounds of cucumbers in the last couple of days, and today I'm going to make bread and butter pickle relish, and I'm bringing you along with me. Old guy's out here working on onions again, which is where he's going to be quite a bit of every week until the onions are all gone. I've nabbed a few of the smaller onions that he has picked and cleaned here. We're going to add that to our relish also. Today, for this demonstration, I'm going to try to do what would be about 1 canner's worth of pints of relish. So what I'm going to aim for is about 8 pounds of cucumbers, and then I need half of that amount, which is 4 pounds of the onions. I have a mixture of slicing and pickling cucumbers here that I'll be picking out of, and then those are my onions. I picked out the smaller ones that he had pulled, and I'll be using that. The first thing I'll need to do is just pick out the ones that I want to use, weigh them up, and get them washed. And then I'll show you how I'll process them. For this, you want to avoid using cucumbers that are too big, that would have seeds that are very developed in them. So pick out fairly small cucumbers, nothing gigantic. Save them for a different project. For this project, I'm going to use my meat grinder. It's really handy, it works great, it'll be fast. Otherwise, you can use a hand crank one that clamps to the edge of your counter. That's a lot more work. And this is, since I already own it, it's already super easy. I'll be using the medium blade because I think the big one is too big and the small one would be too small, so medium is going to work. For grinding them up, I'll take the ends off of each cucumber, and then I need to make sure that it's the right size to go down into the hole of my grinder. And I think everything I have here is, if the cucumber's too big, then I'll have to split it in half or quarters even. On the onions, I'll need to take the root end off of it and then quarter them in order to get them to go down into the grinder. I put a big bowl under my spout that it's going to come out of, and then I'm going to alternate between putting a cucumber through and putting an onion through, so that when I end up with it, it'll already be mixed. Okay, we got it done. It's pretty juicy in the bowl here. The next thing we're going to do is add some salt. The purpose of adding the salt at this point is to draw the moisture out of the cucumbers and the onions. So what we're going to do is add the salt, stir it up, and let it sit for 1.5 hours to 2 hours. The next part is going to take a little bit of time too, but not as long as we had to soak it in the salt water, because the salt has allowed the liquid to come out of the cucumbers and the onions, and so it's accumulated in the bowl. We have to drain that off, then we have to rinse all the salt off, and then we have to let it drain for some more. I'm going to let that sit there for a little while and drain. It doesn't have to be perfectly dry, but I want a lot of the liquid to be gone. Also, I'm going to taste it to see how salty it is. That's still a little bit salty, but I wouldn't call it too salty. While the cucumbers and onions are draining, I'm going to go ahead and get my brine mixed up. And what I'm going to be using today is 6 cups of vinegar, 4 cups of sugar, 4 tablespoons of mustard seed, 4 teaspoons of celery seed, 4 teaspoons of turmeric, 2 teaspoons of ginger, and then 2 teaspoons of peppercorns. And we've got that on the stove. Stir it till the sugar gets dissolved and let it come to a boil. Since this pan isn't big enough to hold the liquid and the other things, I'm going to put the relish part into this pan and then pour the brine over the top of it. I'll stir that and then get it back over on the stove and heat it up again. I have my jars all washed and set up here. This funnel helps get the product into the jar without it going all over the place. In this pan I have my lids. I just poured water on the floor. And then I've got rings that will go on top of there. I own this nice long-handled big ladle that I'll use to scoop out the relish and put it into the jar. Put your relish to within about 1/2 inch of the top. I use a knife to slide down in there to make sure all of the air bubbles are taken out. Then with a clean damp cloth, I'll wipe the top edge of the jar. And while I'm doing this, I'll just make sure that there are no cracks or deformities of the jar that would stop the lid from sealing down. Now I'll put a clean lid on there. Screw the band down finger tight. Now I'll go ahead and finish the rest of these. Well, I put the appropriate amount of water in my water bath canner, and I raised this little rack up to the top so I can put my jars in there. Now let's get it over to the stove. I'll go ahead and get the burner turned on so it can start warming. And I will put these jars over here. For the most part, I'm screwing them down as I go. Now this thing kind of works on a balance, so you have to be careful not to get it out of balance and make everything dump. These jars are pretty hot, so you have to be careful handling them. And I've put hot water in the canner pan, so there shouldn't be any shock that anything goes through. Okay, looks like I can get 10 jars in there. Now I'm going to carefully lower that. And then I'll make sure that the water is over the lids enough, and I think it just barely is. So I'm going to add a little bit more hot water. Okay, timer's going off. Turn the burner off, and then we're ready to take this stuff out of here. I've got some tongs that are made for this job. And we're done. I just thought I'd show you real quick what else I made today. I got 10 jars of beets canned. Thanks for joining me while I made some bread and butter pickle relish, and I appreciate you coming, and we'll see you next time.